Everybody is talking about what South Carolina's defense is going to have to do to stop Drake Maye, but nobody's having that conversation about Spencer Rattler, and I think he's the one that could have a big night on Saturday.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks Podcast. I'm Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and you can find my written work over on Gamecocks Digest on SI.com. Thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team every day. We are free and available both on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Y'all, we've made it. It is Game Day Eve for Shane Beamer and the South Carolina Gamecocks as they'll be taking on the North Carolina Tar Heels in just less than 48 hours from now. I talked about this show a little bit more in depth on our Thursday crossover show that we did with Locked On Tar Heels host Isaac Shade. And if you haven't seen that show, highly recommend you go back and watch that in full. But either way, I predicted that South Carolina was going to win in pretty convincing fashion on that show. And I brought up multiple reasons why I thought South Carolina would pull away in this one. And one of those reasons is because of Spencer Rattler. I think that the hype around Spencer Rattler and what he's done this offseason is real. I think it is genuine. I do not think that it is smoke and mirrors. And because of how the matchups shake out in this game, I think Spencer's going to throw for over 350 yards and have 4 touchdown passes on Saturday night. Let's break down this bold prediction for this game. Starting off with North Carolina's pass defense, and particularly their secondary. This is a defense that gave up 271 passing yards per game on average in 2022. That sounds pretty bad, right? Well, it was the 16th worst mark in the entire country. Pretty sure that's also bottom in the entire Power 5 as well. North Carolina also returns only 2 starters from that defensive backfield. Now, I've brought this up in passing before. Some Tar Heel fans might argue that that is a good thing that some of those guys walked out the door. Still don't fully believe that because I don't think that they completely replenished the talent that did end up exiting. But nonetheless, North Carolina has made an attempt to completely overhaul this unit. They brought in 5 different transfers from various schools this past off season. So the point is, there's a lot of unknown with this unit, and there's also a lack of chemistry with this unit. Because again, they only returned 2 starters from this past fall. And here's the thing. This defensive backfield might be a bit shorthanded when this game takes place on Saturday night in Charlotte. There are rumblings right now that 2 projected starters based on the depth chart in strong safety Don Chapman and star or nickel hybrid defender DeAndre Boykins might not be able to play in this game. And the more intriguing part about this potential storyline heading into this contest is DeAndre Boykins. He is one of the 2 returners that I have been bringing up over the past couple of minutes. And if he cannot go, the Tar Heels, based on the depth chart that they released earlier this week, would be starting a man by the name of DJ Jones. Why does he matter in this entire equation? Well, get this. DJ Jones was playing running back for North Carolina this past fall. Yes, you heard me correctly. He was playing running back on offense in 2022, not defensive back on defense. Going from wide receiver to running back for a Dakereon Joyner, that's an easier transition than going from running back to defensive back. So my whole point with this is that if Spencer Rattler plays like he's capable of against what's basically a unit that's been thrown together by Mack Brown and this Tar Heel coaching staff over the past 8 months, it is going to be a show in my opinion, when this game takes place in prime time in Bank of America Stadium. And that's not even accounting for some of the positives on South Carolina's side of things. And I've talked about Spencer Rattler and all the hype that's been surrounding him for the past several weeks. But let's talk about some of the connections that he has on this team. Think about this. Spencer Rattler, of course, is coming back for his second year in South Carolina's offense. And clearly, having continuity in a pro-style offense and having some experience now against tougher competition like the SEC is going to do Spencer Rattler some good. But you know what's also going to do him some good? Having some guys returning around him. Everybody brings up Juice Wells. And that is certainly important considering he is going to be the number one de facto receiving target for South Carolina this fall. But we've also got to bring up guys like Xavier Legette, Mack Brown, Omega Blake, Dakereon Joyner, and Juju McDowell, who are all also going to be returning and thus will be going to their second year playing alongside Spencer in this offense. Therefore, all those guys have some kind of rapport that's been built over that period of time. And that doesn't include guys like Trey Knox, Joshua Simon, and Eddie Lewis, who, sure, did not play with Spencer Rattler in 2022, but they did get here during the offseason. They did go through spring practice with Spencer Rattler, and they went through the player run practices with Spencer Rattler and the rest of these guys. So essentially, they've immersed themselves into this unit at this point. And the other thing that we've also talked about plenty of times now on this show is Spencer Rattler and how he is in lockstep with Dowell Loggains. I brought this up, I believe, in the earlier portion of this week, but Spencer Rattler, him getting Dowell Loggains as his offensive coordinator for this upcoming season, I think was the perfect match for him. Considering everything that he had to deal with in Marcus Satterfield's offense this past fall. If you need a reminder of that, by the way, then I'm sure that you probably watched the Nebraska game on Thursday night. Wasn't exactly all that great. Granted, they're rebuilding. Point being, Dowell Loggains is a lot more, I think, receptive to complete and total feedback from everybody on this offense. He is making it a point to cater this offense around Spencer Rattler's skill set. There's been a different vibe coming from Spencer Rattler about this system heading into this year. Him talking about how much he loves this offense. And you can just tell by the way he talks about it, these player pressers that have taken place for the past couple weeks, that again, this talk is not fake. It feels legit. It feels genuine. And so you consider all of these factors, what we've heard about Spencer, and what we know and what we also don't know about North Carolina's secondary coming into this game. Spencer, in my opinion, is going to start off 2023 how he left 2022, on fire. Now, if this does take place, and Spencer Rattler, let's say, gets off to a hot start in this game on Saturday, North Carolina is probably going to try and adjust their defensive strategy as the game progresses. And if they do what I think they might do, it could open the door for another position group to have a big-time night in the passing game. I'll dive into which position group I'm talking about in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Now, I know that some of you might be pondering a last-minute decision on getting a ticket to go to the South Carolina-North Carolina game. Some of you might be waiting till quite literally hours before this game is supposed to take place, and thus you'll be very stressed out that you might miss out on the game at that point. And if you want to avoid game day stress to start the 2023 season, Game Time has got you covered. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. They've also got this thing called the Game Time Guarantee, which means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to this Friday Game Day Eve edition of the Locked On Gamecocks Podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day in just 30 minutes. And as always, thank you to each and every one of you every day for making the Locked On Gamecocks Podcast your daily choice for South Carolina Gamecock sports coverage. I talked about how I feel like Spencer Rattler is just going to go off against this North Carolina secondary on Saturday night. And due to how I think North Carolina's defense will respond to that likely performance, in my opinion, I think the Gamecocks running back unit will record over 100 total receiving yards in this contest. So let's break down what I think North Carolina's going to do first of all, and then we'll move over to the running back position group. So if Spencer Rattler does what I think he'll do on Saturday night, which I think is going to throw for a lot of passing yards, I think you're going to see a ton of chunk plays in this game. I feel like that North Carolina is essentially going to reach a point where their defensive coaching staff is going to kind of get together and they're going to say, look, we're not going to be able to stop number 7 tonight. So if we're going to potentially lose this game on our side of the ball against that guy on the other sideline, we might as well at least just go for the gusto. We might as well just go for broke and just blitz the heck out of him. So I think that North Carolina, what they'll start doing is they'll start incorporating some more linebacker blitzes. If there's one unit on that side of the ball that I know that Isaac Shade likes and some of these Tar Heel fans like, it is their linebacker unit. Cedric Gray, probably the best player on that entire side of the ball, one of the better linebackers in the entire ACC. Power Echols is apparently another decent starter alongside him. They might question their depth a little bit, but again, from what I've heard, they do like their linebackers, so that is a group to watch out for in this game. I believe that they'll send more of those guys on blitzes, and I think that they'll also maybe incorporate some weak side corner blitzes, maybe use that star defender on the weak side to try and sort of just get Spencer from his blind side. Just try to find different ways to essentially rattle him. I know I didn't have to throw that in there, but I did anyways. Apologies. But if they end up doing that, if it all plays out the way I think it's going to, I think that what will happen is Spencer Rattler and this offensive coaching staff, they'll eventually realize, okay, these guys are just going to start blitzing me every chance they basically have, just to try to see if they can make some plays happen. We're going to have to start calling some more hot routes from the backfield. Now, for those of you who might not know what a hot route is essentially a situation where you think that a blitz is coming, or it's pretty clear based on defensive alignments that there's a blitz coming. And therefore, it is a hot situation. You got to get the ball out fast. So your hot route is essentially your safety valve in those kind of situations. And typically, one of either two guys is going to be your hot route option. Your tight ends or your running backs. And in this case, I think the running backs are going to benefit greatly from this potential scenario where North Carolina starts to dial up more blitzes to try and stay in this game on their side of the ball. And this is where I think Dakereon Joyner and Juju McDowell are going to play a big factor in this game. Obviously, Dakereon Joyner, he lives in the nightmares of Tar Heel fans and maybe even some of those players with what he did in the 2021 Duke's Mayo Bowl a couple seasons back. And sure, these teams are vastly different now compared to how they were constructed then. But the point is, Dakereon Joyner, you know that he's going to come into this game, and he is not going to lack confidence against this North Carolina football team. And Juju McDowell, it kind of gets forgotten how he also had a solid outing in that performance. And look, we've mentioned this several times as well. Juju, yes, he's the smallest running back in this entire room. Yes, he will likely never be a 3-down back on this football team. However, when Juju catches a pass out on the perimeter and he has open space in front of him and some one-on-one opportunities, he is extremely dangerous in those situations. So what I think will happen is those two guys in particular, they will be in a lot more packages, especially as they recognize a lot more of these blitzes coming Spencer Rattler's way, and therefore there'll be more hot route options incorporated in those plays. Spencer will dump off a lot more passes to those guys, and North Carolina, their secondary being so worried about making sure everybody's covered on the back end, even if it's a lot of zone coverage, Dakereon, Joyner, Juju, McDowell will get a ton of opportunities to catch a pass and have at least maybe 7 to 10 yards of green grass in front of them because, again, the secondary maybe doesn't want to get beat or have the top taken off of them from their backside. I think that would bode quite well for a Dakereon Joyner, who is now 229 pounds, and he sure looks like it in a very good way, and definitely has great athleticism still, good agility, good speed, and a Juju McDowell, who, again, he might not be the biggest back, but he can sure juke you out your cleats if you're not careful in how you approach him. So I think that is how this is going to play out, and I think that these two guys, they're going to have a ton of plays potential on Saturday where they catch a pass, say, around the line of scrimmage or maybe just a couple yards ahead of the line of scrimmage, but they end up getting like 10-plus yards on those receptions. I could totally see that happening if Spencer winds up having one heck of a night on Saturday against North Carolina. So I think, again, this running back unit, the second bowl prediction for this game, that unit will record over 100 total receiving yards. And you can tell, obviously, I think that Dakereon Joyner and Juju McDowell, those are the two guys that are going to spearhead this possibility taking place. We talked a lot about the offensive side of the ball for South Carolina to this point in today's show. But you know I can't leave y'all without talking about the defense at least a little bit to end the show. And that is where I'm going to go with my last bold prediction for this game. South Carolina's defense will hold North Carolina to a third down conversion rate less than 30%. This defense, I somewhat get it when people kind of gloss over this unit. They don't have a bunch of big-time recognizable names. That's not to say that they don't. Obviously, we all know who Nick Emenworthy is. We all know who DQ Smith is. We all know who Tonka Hemingway is. We all know who Pup Howard is, who Mo Kaba is, who Marcel Style is. We all know all of those guys. But nationally speaking, probably the most recognizable name out of that entire group is Nick Emenworthy, and then after him, maybe some people bring up Tonka Hemingway, but nobody else gets brought up. In essence, people don't think that this unit is full of a bunch of Drake Maye type stars where maybe they're going to be future first round draft picks. And maybe to a certain degree that is true. But this defense is full of really good football players. And this defense has something this time around that it did not have even in the 2021 Duke's Mayo Bowl win over North Carolina. And that is depth. This defense is so much deeper than it was 2 seasons ago. Maybe not at the edge position, a position that they have got to recruit up, essentially. They've got to bring in more talent. They're certainly doing so. But you look at defensive tackle, that position is definitely deeper than it was 2 years ago. You look at linebacker, probably the best job in terms of overhauling the talent and maybe overall athleticism of a room has taken place with that position group. And the defensive backfield, sure, maybe they still want to get a couple more guys. And they certainly have some help coming in the 2024 class with guys like Kelvin Hunter and Braden Lee joining the fold. But this entire unit is deeper overall compared to what Shane Beamer and Clayton White started with. Why is that important? Well, when you have got depth on defense, here's the deal. On defense at some point, you're going to be faced with drives that are going to be 10-play drives, 12-play drives, maybe even 15-play drives. And you're going to have that against a quarterback in Drake Maye that wants to be in that kind of situation where he's just sort of grinding you down over the course of an entire drive. But when you've got depth on defense, you can better withstand those long drives. And I think that's what South Carolina's going to be able to do on Saturday. I think this rush defense is going to take a step forward this year. I've mentioned this several times leading into this season. Again, this linebacker unit, I love it. The defensive tackle group, I love it. The edge group, maybe pass rushing, still leaves a little bit to be desired. But you don't need to be super talented to be a good run defender. You don't. Rush defense, quite frankly, is all about reading and reacting and making the right fundamental plays. That is rush defense in essence. I think if this secondary is given a chance to get off the field in third down, obvious passing situations, they're going to get the job done more often than not. It's funny. Again, people have talked so much about how South Carolina's defense has got to stop Drake Maye. Sure, they do. But if you compare North Carolina's defense facing Spencer Rattler and South Carolina's defense facing Drake Maye, whose secondary is better equipped to stop the quarterback they're going up against? We all know the answer. Now, 2/3 of the country somehow doesn't know the answer. Apparently doesn't know about Torian Gray. They don't know about Nick Emenworry. They don't know about Marcellus Dial. They don't know about some of these guys somehow. The SEC. I mean, none of these guys made a preseason All-SEC team. They're going to make some people look like fools by the end of this season. Promise you that. All they need is this defensive front to give them a chance, get the job done on early downs, help them out, and allow them to go to work on money downs, on third down. And I think that will happen against North Carolina. And here's the thing. I don't see a North Carolina running back on this roster that, quite frankly, scares me. I don't. At least, in my opinion. There's not a guy that you have to sit there and go, if we don't account for him, it's going to be a long night for this defense. I don't see that dude on that roster. Now, I know that they're excited about British Brooks coming back. That's a guy that I think played against South Carolina. Ironically enough, the last appearance he made was against the Gamecocks in the Duke's Mayo Bowl in 2021. He did have a couple of solid runs in that game. I do recall that. Apparently, unfortunately, tore an ACL, I believe, before the 2022 season. Might be wrong on that, but I know he missed off last year. He comes back. Tar Heel fans are excited that he's back. They think that he can spearhead that room. Obviously, that's asking a lot for a running back who's missed a lot of time in live football games. We'll see. But again, British Brooks, maybe he does have some skill that I'm underestimating here. But I don't think that he's going to necessarily threaten South Carolina's defense to a significant degree. I just don't see it. And here's one other factor that I want to touch on. South Carolina's defense is going up against an offensive coordinator in Chip Lindsey that they have faced before. For those of you that may remember, Chip Lindsey was the head coach for the Troy Trojans back in 2021. He also was their offensive play caller, I believe. He called plays for his team that season. Now, obviously, Chip Lindsey's going to have far better talent here at North Carolina than he had at Troy. So, it's not going to be an apples-to-apples comparison in terms of how he might call this game. But you can glean some things from that contest. And at least Clayton White and his staff have something to go off of when it comes to studying the potential tendencies schematically and play calling wise from Chip Lindsey. Gene Chizik and this North Carolina defensive coaching staff, they're not going to have any sort of film to go off of with Dowell Lawkins. They've got nothing. They have to use NFL film. They're going to have to watch some things at Arkansas and somehow try to basically throw darts on a dartboard to see what things he might take from maybe Kendall Briles' offense and incorporate in South Carolina's offense. Dowell Lawkins has a very big advantage in that aspect. He does. And Clayton White has an advantage in the sense that, hey, he's coached against Chip Lindsey. And sure, you could say the same about Chip Lindsey, but the thing is, South Carolina's defense, for how sloppy that game was, and trust me, I watched it back on Thursday afternoon. My gosh, I hope that I never have to turn that game on again. That was awful, even though they won. But the point is, Clayton White, he's going to know what he's going up against. And so you throw that in there with, in my opinion, a better defensive front in terms of rush defense and a secondary that, sure, lost some star power in terms of their cornerbacks in Cam Smith and Darius Rush, but they've got guys that are ready to take over those spots. They've got depth. They've got good veteran leadership still. They've got at least the experience back there, and they've also got some really young but really talented dudes who have either already made an impact for this team or are chomping at the bit to get out there and make their mark in that secondary. And so combine all that together, I think South Carolina's defense, when it comes to the money down, third down, North Carolina will convert less than 30% of their third down plays on offense on Saturday night. With that being said, that does it for this Friday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show, as always. What are y'all's thoughts on this game? Do you have any bold predictions about how this all might go down? Do you agree with mine, or do you think that I missed maybe an obvious one that I should have included on today's show? No matter what your thoughts are, let me know down below in the comments section if you watch today's show on YouTube, or shoot me a direct message on Twitter at @aline_SC if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app. Once again, thank y'all so much for tuning in. We finally made it. For those of you who are traveling to the game, please be safe, please be careful, and also had a fantastic time. Hopefully that fantastic time will be carried out all the way through the weekend into Sunday and into the beginning of week 2. I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.